4:05 p.m. Marie, would you please go through a roll call to establish a quorum?
Yes. Eric Housley.
Here, sorry, was on mute.
No worries. Arvin Nishal. Not quite yet. Barbara Frankrum.
Oh.
Here. Courtney Garcia.
Here.
Danielle Barreca.
Here.
Greg Bennett.
Present.
Hector Gallegos.
Here.
Joshua Schultz. Leon Brauning.
Here.
Ted Ward.
Here.
Wade Woodward.
Present.
And then our alternates, Evan Versalini.
Here.
Sylvia Regalado Zachlad. Present. And then Stephen Green. Thank you. We have a
Marie, can you go back to Arvin for me, please?
Oh,
sure.
here. Sorry, here. I was muted.
No worries, Steve. Arvin Nishal. His audio is connecting.
Yeah. Well, I think we can see him. He's here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. And then Nikki, if you could put the flag up, please, as part of our procedural item, we do a flag salute. So I'll wait for the flag to get up. Okay, if everybody can join me, I pledge allegiance
To the flag.
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may have a seat. Okay, next item up, item 1.3 is our superintendent welcome. So Dr. Rosanna Musetti, would you please lead us in your welcome for the 7-11 committee?
Great, thank you so much, Assistant Superintendent Mike Pearson. So for everyone, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Rosanna Musetti, and I serve as the proud superintendent of schools for the Napa Valley Unified School District. I just want to take a moment to formally welcome all of our viewers that are here and our staff that are here today, and most importantly, our 7-11 committee members. I want to just start out by thanking you for your time, your engagement, and your commitment to our community and your willingness to serve in this capacity and role. Before I do some highlights in my former welcome, I thought it would be really helpful for staff and 7-11 committee members to introduce themselves so that we just know who's on the committee. If you could just, I'll call out the squares as they appear here on the screen. And if you could just say your full name and then your sort of role in the community that brought you here to serving in this capacity for the Napa Valley Unified School District. So I will get us started, and the first square is Wade.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Wade Woodward. I'm a lifelong resident of the Napa Valley. My wife is a recent retiree from the school district, Lori Woodward. My mom taught in the school district and actually worked with Barb Franco a million years ago out at Silverado. So I'm a DT Davis, Vichy, Silverado, Vintage High guy, and been in the construction industry my whole career post-college, and served on the City of Napa Planning Commission in the past. So looking forward to it.
Great, thank you for being here, Wade. We appreciate it.
No
next is Leon.
Hi, my name is Leon Braunen. I'm a retired real estate broker and appraiser. I've lived here in Napa County for 42 years. 4 of my children have gone through the Napa County schools, and my wife's 3 children, 3 daughters are still in it. So we're certainly looking for the best things for the children.
Thank you so much, Leon. Marie, you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, who you are?
Sure. I am Marie McMurray. I'm an executive assistant for Mike Pearson in the operations department.
Great. Thanks for all your logistical and administrative support, Marie. Next is Greg.
My name is Greg Bennett, and I've been a partner with the CPA firm G&J Cyberlook & Company for the last 40 years. I've had 4 children go through the Napa Unified School District. They're all successful adults at this point. And I've been involved in many nonprofits over the years and I believe strongly in supporting our community.
Thank you so much, Greg. We're glad to hear the 4 graduates are successful. So that's always great. Thanks for being here. Danielle?
Hi, I'm Danielle Barreca. I'm a realtor with Coldwell Banker Brokers of the Valley here in Napa. I grew up attending Napa schools, and I served on the general plan with Ted. So I bring a little planning background, smidge. So I'm excited to be here.
Great, welcome. Thank you, Danielle. Next on the screen is Courtney.
Hi, my name is Courtney Garcia. I am a 3rd grade teacher here at Snow Elementary School. I am also the chief negotiator for the Napa Valley Educators Association, and I sit on the board of the Teacher Resource Center of the North Bay.
Welcome, Courtney. Thanks for being here. Rob, you're next.
Hello, my name is Rob Mingwall. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services.
Thanks, Rob. Ted, you're next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ted Ward. I grew up in Napa schools as well. My wife and I are both educators. I'm the principal at Alta Heights Elementary School. Our kids attend Napa Valley Unified School District schools. And like Danielle said, was really proud to serve on our most recent city's general plan.
Great. Thank you, Ted. Thanks for being here. And great shirt. Okay, next is Evan.
Hello, I am a middle school math teacher here in the district, Napa native, and a site rep for NVEA.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Thanks for being here the last few days of summer. Next is Eric.
Hi, Eric Housley, business owner, but Yountville School for me, Redwood Vintage, and then my kids went Yountville a little bit, Vichy, Silverado Vintage, so kind of have the whole valley surrounded. And yeah, business owner, run soccer in the community, the men's team as well as the youth programs and such. So very involved in that way.
Great. Thank you so much for being here, Eric, and welcome. Hector.
Good evening, Hector Gallegos, CSEA chapter president. Grew up here in Napa, went to Shear School, Westwood at the time, Silverado, McPherson, and then Vintage, and currently work in the general maintenance department for NVUSD.
Great, Hector. Thank you so much for serving on this committee. Next, we have Josh. Oh, audio problems.
Josh, do you want to call in? I can give you a call-in number if you want.
Well, he's got the scaffold there. Deputy Superintendent of Napa County Office of Education. So good job serving the alternative, presenting an alternative there. Hopefully we can get the audio fixed. Thanks. Next is Barb.
Hi, my name is Barbara Franco. I'm a retired NVUSD administrator, having been a teacher, athletic coach, assistant principal, and retired as the principal of Napa High in 2015. I have 2 daughters who went through NVUSD schools, having gone through McPherson, Silverado, and Napa High. They are actually 4th generation Napans graduating from Napa High. I attended Redwood and Napa High, so that doesn't exactly give me the ability to say that I'm a Napa native because I didn't start kindergarten or wasn't born here. So, but I would like to think that I am. And my daughters are doing well, and I have one daughter that is a teacher at McPherson, and very proud of the work that she's doing, and very proud to know that she's a Napa High grad. And my other daughter actually went to UCLA at the same time as Ted Ward, and so there's a connection there with Linda and Ted, and so that's pretty cool for us. And I'm just happy to be here.
That's incredible. Thanks for sharing all that, Barb. And we're so grateful that you're here. And thank you for 2 generations of service to NVUSD. It's amazing. Steve, you're next.
Hi, I'm Steve Green. I'm not from here. I'm actually from Central Coast, Ventura County. And moved here in 2009. I've got a 17-year-old at American Canyon High School. So we live in American Canyon. I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm a clinical social worker who moved over into project management and IT about 20 years ago. And I've been very active in our community, advocating for students, particularly with visual and performing arts. I'm a band dad, so I really help with the band, and also we're helping set up the Napa Valley Band Reserve, and shout out to Mike for all of his support for us.
That's great. So thanks for all your passion of the performing arts out there in American Canyon. Thank you for being here. All right, and I think we have Arvind. You have audio, Arvind, are we good? Can you hear us? You want to introduce yourself? I think you're still muted. It shows that you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, my name is Arvind Nishal. I live in American Canyon from last maybe 26 years. I have 2 children. They got married and we have 3 grandchildren. My children went to Vintage High in Napa, and now my grandson is going to middle school and joining this year to the high school. And I'm a business owner. I have a UPS store in American Canyon. I'm a realtor, and I have a wine warehouse in airport in Napa. Plus, I do a lot of good for the children. I have a helping hand into American NGO, where I go to India and help the rural children to go for the education. So I'm doing this one for the last 11 years, and a lot of children got good grades and they got doctored, they become attorneys, and now they are working very well. So I'm pleased that I'm helping the children in India also. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Arvind. Welcome, and thank you for all of your support for the children in our community. And then last, but certainly not least, Mr. Pearson, you want to just let everybody know formally your role?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Pearson. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Operational Services. I oversee food service, transportation, maintenance and grounds, operations or custodial facilities, and then school planning and construction. So those are my roles here in Napa Valley Unified, and I really appreciate all of you being willing to volunteer to be part of the 7-Eleven committee. Thank you, Dr. Musetti.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. So thank you so much. Just grounding ourselves in who's in the space, who's in the meeting, who's on the committee. And you hear the rich, diverse experience that we have. I feel really, really honored and blessed that so many key, stakeholders, you represent various stakeholders in our community that could come and serve in this capacity to make sure that we do a really, really good job of managing our assets here in the Napa Valley Unified School District. So I just want to take a brief few minutes to kind of ground us and why we're here and why this work is so important. And I also want to identify, honor, and recognize that I know some of you, it's not your first time on a 7-Eleven committee. We know that the district has had 7-Eleven committees over the course of the years, given that they've had properties to surplus in the past. The last 7-Eleven committee that we erected, as some of you may know, because some of you served on that 7-Eleven committee, was actually erected for the purposes of school closure and consolidation, which can be another purpose and role set forth by the district when it comes to forming a 7-Eleven committee. This 7-Eleven committee, this current composition of the 7-Eleven committee is set around the purpose of surplusing our property. And this work is really, really important within the school district context. And I think it's often underestimated in terms of importance. And so I just want to take a minute to really recognize its value and importance. As superintendent, I'm here to kind of tell you and any community that might be tuning into the meeting this afternoon is that it's important, and that I need to thank you on behalf of my office. And I know the Board of Education has tremendous gratitude as they do their work of governance, having community members like you coming to kind of serve in this capacity around this function of surplusing property. So why, something like surplusing property, why is that so important and sometimes undervalued or underestimated in terms of its importance? I want to make sure that we're really, really clear on the value add of the work that you're going to do over the course of the next few meetings. Our attorney, Kelly Rem, who we'll be introducing shortly, she's going to make sure that you have clarity around your role, function, and purpose. But I want to explain why you assuming the role is so important to the children of the Napa Valley Unified School District, because so often there's a disconnect between something like a 7-Eleven committee that's focused on surplusing property, and how is that connected to the children and the work that we do in terms of our mission and vision as an educational agency, which is to provide academic excellence to our students. And sometimes the connection isn't so transparent, visible, clear, or direct between this work around property and how it positions our school district to be able to deliver academic excellence. So many of you describe the academic excellence that has touched your families or you yourself as a graduate of the K-12 district here in the community. And I'm here to say that for the almost 17,000 students that are currently sitting in our system, this work actually impacts them because it positions us as a school district to be able to deliver on our promise of academic excellence when the district is effectively managed, right? And a school district that effectively manages its assets means that it's tuning into financial stabilization, financial stability, financial viability, not just because, that's a basic, important, rudimentary thing to do, but it positions us to be able to focus on our mission of providing excellence in programming and services for the kids. And if we don't do a good job with our assets, then we're not able to deliver on that. So it really serves, the surplusing of the property serves as a first step in positioning the district to potentially down the road look at selling some of its property. It's critical to our financial stability, viability as a school district. And like I said, and have probably mentioned 3 or 4 times because it's that important, it positions us to be able to implement our vision of transforming the lives of our children in the community by giving them access to a high quality education. We can't provide a high quality education if we're not being responsible with our assets and managing our finances effectively. And so in my tenure over the last 3 years, we've had to focus, hyper focus on that. The school board has had to hyper focus on that as a means to getting to that academic excellence, because school districts that are not effectively managing their assets or their finances will not have that stability that's necessary to be able to pay attention to their educational mission. We believe, and I know, as a member of the governance team, the 7 trustees that I work with and for, we believe that if the district is strategic and responsible with its asset, it will provide us the appropriate means to take care of our current facilities, that we still have, that, remain open here to serve across the community. And again, it allows us to be able to really look at how we can use our general education dollars to serve our students by designing high quality programs and services. In fact, this is so important to our school board. We go through the exercise of establishing annual priorities as a governance team. We have a 6-goal strategic plan in the district, but the work the work of the school board and myself is to say, okay, in this given year, in 21-22, our upcoming academic year, what are we going to prioritize in order for us to advance those strategic goals that we've set as a governance team? And one of the annual priorities that our school board and myself have set for the year, the school board has charged me and my team with focusing on this to make sure that we accomplish and deliver and execute on behalf of our community and our students to get the right things done at the right time. One of those annual priorities is the ongoing financial stabilization of the school district in a declining enrollment environment. And why the school board has focused my team and I on this effort is to ensure that the Napa Valley Unified School District continues to have the resources necessary to deliver excellence in education despite declining enrollment and declining revenues. So much of the declining enrollment and declining revenues reality that is an external factor to some extent beyond our control because of a lack of affordability in the Valley, et cetera, you know, we can't fully control that lever, but what we can control is how we respond to it as an organization, not ignoring it, not panicking around it, but having a strategy, a short-term and a long-term strategy on how to address it to make sure that despite this external factor influencing us in terms of revenues, because declining enrollment for us equals declining revenues, less students means less dollars, then we can create buffers and mitigate that impact by being responsible with our assets and being strategic with our dollars. And that is really the spirit of the work that you're about to embark on. So, you know, one of our success indicators in making sure that this priority that we get the job done around this priority in the 22-23 school year is that we establish a 7-Eleven committee that can help us with the surplusing of property so that we can start to look at, you know, where are some potential properties that we can, you know, once surplused, potentially sell in order to bring dollars back to the school district to be able to, you know, put them back in our current facilities, for example, right? And doing that work contributes to that financial stabilization, making sure that we, you know, you all have benefited from the school district. It sounds like you have deep connections to the school district. We want to make sure that this remains a district of excellence. And we believe that our financial management of the school district is an important part of that. And we're having to pay close attention to that, especially because of the declining enrollment. So with that being said, I hope that grounds you in a purpose and in a why, and it grounds you in the importance of this work. You are impacting the educational lives of our children as a community member serving on this 7-Eleven committee. And for that, again, I want to thank you. So I think unless there's any questions for me around that purpose and that welcome, I think I'm ready to go to the next agenda item, Mr. Pearson, which I believe is Ms. Rem, correct?
Yep. So the first to see if there's any questions for Dr. Musetti. Okay, great. We'll move on to item 2.0, which is information items, and 2.1 is the purpose and regulations regarding the 7-Eleven committee. This is a discussion item, and I'd like to introduce Ms. Kelly Rim, who is our legal counsel for the school district regarding our school properties. So Ms. Rim, would you take it away from here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And hi, everyone. So my name is Kelly Rem. I'm an attorney with Lozano Smith, representing the school district on various property matters. And the reason I'm here today and likely at future meetings is really just to help make sure that the committee is following the law, doing what it's supposed to under the Education Code, and also complying with the Brown Act. I'll talk a little bit about those things briefly, and then I'll largely stay out of the way and let you do your important work here without having to hear too much from the lawyer. So it was a pleasure to hear all of your various backgrounds and information, and that's a perfect segue into what I first wanted to cover, which is composition of the committee. As you probably know from going through the application process, there are certain categories that the legislature has required be represented on this committee. So we need to have business owners, landowners and renters, parents, administrators, teachers, and certain land use planning and subject matter experts. And so many of you, if not all of you, check more than one box of those different categories, but there's a lot of different perspectives here. And I think that's both really important to the process, but also it's a legal requirement. As far as the specific role of the committee, fundamentally, what you're here for is to make recommendations to the board, to the school board, regarding use and dispossession of real property. So that's kind of what we're here for. That's the focus. The Education Code, there's about 5 or 6 provisions that govern 7-Eleven committees or district advisory committees. So they're pretty short. And the main one, which is 17-390, lays out 5 areas of kind of tasks for you all to be aware of. So the first one is to review projected enrollment and other data provided by district staff. And that's largely going to occur later in the meeting today. So district staff will be presenting specific information regarding enrollment, capacity, property, et cetera, that will help you to do your important work. The next two tasks are to establish a priority list of surplus space and real property that is acceptable to the community, and to circulate that priority risk for community input and hearings. That seems a little bit wonky in this situation, but what that really means is what we're doing here is having these meetings, agendizing these meetings, inviting the public to attend and provide comment and review information along with you as you come up with your recommendations related to property. And then at the end of each kind of segment of the committee process, the tasks are to make a final determination regarding the limits of tolerance of use and space in surplus real property, and to forward that to the governing board for consideration. This is an advisory committee, so of course, whatever the committee recommends is not binding on the school board, but of course it's important to them, and it will be something they take into consideration as they move forward in deciding whether or not to surplus various properties. So that's kind of the overall role of the committee. That's what the statute says and what it requires. And as far as charge, the board specifically, when they appointed or convened this committee, rather than specifying one or more particular properties, they said that this committee would consider properties as identified by district staff. So the first of those is going to be the Carneros property, and that's what will be discussed later on this evening. So that's kind of the overall role. It's advisory. It has a lot to do with use and disposition of space. So you'll be looking at information related to the district enrollment overall, as well as particular property in question to determine whether or not it's excess or surplus to the needs of the district, and typically make a recommendation whether that whether you believe that property should be sold or leased or one or the other, and then ultimately presenting that recommendation to the board at a future board meeting. So that's kind of the role of the committee. And then again, one of the reasons I'm here is to talk a little bit about the Brown Act. I know that most of you are familiar with this from having both served on committees previously, planning commissions, and all kinds of different boards and committees. So I'll be a little bit brief here, but it is really important. The Brown Act, for anyone who's not familiar, is California's open meeting law. And it requires that all governing boards, and it also applies to committees like this one, not all committees, but if certain requirements are met, which they are here, then the Brown Act applies. And the kind of general rules are, number one, that you can't conduct business other than what's agendized for meetings. So for regular meetings, you've got to post an agenda at least 72 hours ahead of time so that the public knows what kind of business is going to be discussed and acted upon. And no business is discussed outside of those open public meetings, and no business is discussed unless it is included on the agenda that was properly posted. The main goals of the Brown Act are transparency, making sure that the public, can benefit from not just what the action was that was taken, but also the process that led up to getting there, and provide their comment. So that's another important aspect of the Brown Act, is allowing for the public to attend the meetings and to provide comment on both agenda and non-agenda items at each meeting. So that's going to be really important. As far as process for the meetings themselves, there's the Brown Act, there's also board bylaws, which I realize this is not the governing board of the school district, but generally speaking, committees formed by the board will follow those same procedures for meetings. And so one of the most important ones to be aware of is going to be the one that deals with public comment. And just so everyone's aware, the board policy says that each person is limited to 3 minutes per comment, and the total for one item is supposed to be limited to 20 minutes. But the committee chair can increase that time limit if the committee consents to that. So you may have a particular item where there's a lot of commenters and you feel it's important to increase the total time to allow more. That can be done at the pleasure of the committee. So I kind of mentioned the most important things with the Brown Act for this group to be aware of are no business of the committee should be discussed outside of these meetings, and particularly not with a quorum or 6 or more of you at a time. That's pretty straightforward, but one of the common pitfalls these days is with electronic communications. So you want to be very careful about anything that you say, for example, in an email that might be with other committee members. One of the common pitfalls that we constantly see is the reply all. If you're getting, and I know this district is very good at blind copying so that that doesn't happen. But just as an example, if you're getting information from district staff that's sent to everyone in the committee, you want to be very careful not to send back, really anything, reply all with anything. But the idea is that would be seen as discussing business outside of a meeting and therefore be a potential Brown Act violation. So be very careful of that. There's also really inadvertent acts that can lead to Brown Act violations. For example, committee member A discusses with committee member B, and that gets to committee member C, and eventually there were 5 different conversations, but they result in everyone forming a consensus outside of a public meeting. That could potentially be a Brown Act violation as well. So the main thing I just want to leave you with is just be very careful and really avoid at all costs discussing any of the business of the committee with each other outside of these public meetings. And finally, the last thing I want to say about the Brown Act is there may be questions that come up from time to time. Certainly there may be questions during the meetings that come up, and district staff can refer those to me as desired. If there are questions outside the meeting, same thing. You'd want to bring them to the attention of district staff, and they can always refer to me if needed on those types of things. That's kind of Brown Act in a nutshell. The one other thing to be aware of is conflicts of interest. I believe this committee, and Superintendent Musetti can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the committee members were required to complete Form 700s, or maybe not on this, in this case.
Murray, have we we haven't done the distribution of 700 form yet. No, but we will.
Okay, that's great. So then this is a good introduction to that. Just really quickly, California law is very concerned with public servants having conflicts of interest, because we want to make sure that there's no temptation to serve their own interests versus the public's interests. And so as members of this committee performing public service, you are subject to those rules. And the main thing to be aware of, a lot of it is pretty common sense. If you have some sort of economic interest that may be impacted by the recommendations you're making here, then those would be disclosed on your Form 700. And that's a form that's approved by the state that all of district staff, board members, et cetera, are required to complete, and this committee will be required to complete as well. And that some of that may have been included in the application process as well. So I don't think there's any concerns here, but just something to be aware of that may be coming your way. Any questions on any of that? I know I went through it kind of fast, but I want to make sure that we can get into the meat of your tasks here. Okay.
Okay, Kelly, I'm not seeing any, or here looking for any, no one seems to have their hand raised or anything. So I think we can move to item 3 on action items.
Okay. And I think that's the, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, this is the election of the chairperson and the vice chair. And so Kelly, if you'll lead us in this, well, at least lead us in the election of a chairperson, and the chairperson then can lead the committee in the election of a vice chair. Great.
Okay, so this is where you all get to take over the meeting. We're going to call for nominations for the chair and the vice chair. And just really quickly, as far as role, because I know we'll get that question. And again, I know a lot of you are already familiar with this, but the role of the chair is not to post the agenda or provide the information. That will be done largely by district staff and facilitated by district staff. The role of the chair is to run the meeting. So call the meeting to order, establish the quorum, and run through the items, make sure that public comment is adequately addressed, and call for motions and seconds on the action items, things like that. So you're really just making sure that the meetings are running according to Brown Act requirements and requirements of the agenda and the board bylaws. The vice chair would then step in anytime the chair is not able to be present. And so we're going to call for nominations, and you can nominate yourself if you'd like to serve. I think maybe we'll start with the chair. And then once we have one or more nominations, we'll look for a motion to approve an individual as the chair and a second, and then we'll take a vote on that. And then that person will take over the meeting and do the same for the vice chair. So do I have any nominations?
I would, if Barb's up for it, she did it last time, she could be the chair, I'd be up for it.
I second it for that one. For Barbara Franco.
Okay.
She did a wonderful job last time.
Thank you.
Okay, do we want to call for a vote on that? I don't know if Marie, you want to call the roll call or?
I can, definitely.
Okay.
Eric Housley,
Yes.
Harveen Nishal,
Yes.
Barbara Franco,
I suppose that would be yes.
Courtney Garcia,
Yes.
Danielle Barreca,
Yes.
Greg Bennett,
Yes.
Hector Gallegos,
Yes.
Joshua Schultz,
Yes.
Leon Browning,
Yes.
Ted Ward,
Yes.
and Wade Woodward.
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor.
See what happens, Barb, when you do a good job. We don't even ask you if you'll accept a nomination. We just go ahead and take it right to a vote.
I understand. I understand. I'm happy to do the best work that I can here. As any of you know from when I did this last time, I'm not afraid to ask questions or make sure that I'm leading you down the right path. And I think that you should feel confident with that if you're just doing this for the first time, because I'm always going to check with you and make sure you're ready to move forward. And if you're not, then we'll pause and make sure that we get any of our questions answered by staff or by Kelly if that's necessary for us to do. So thank you very much. And like I said, I'll do my best. What we will do now is we need to put a vice chair in place. And so the nominations are open for a vice chair. Any nominations? I would like to.
I go for Joshua.
Okay.
I'd like to decline, actually. I think in my role as Deputy Superintendent of the county office, and which includes fiscal oversight of the district, it might be inappropriate for me to serve in that role. And I apologize to the committee for my inability to speak earlier. I actually had to restart and uninstall Zoom to get it working again.
How about Eric Housley?
Yeah, I would like to nominate Eric Housley. Who was the person that nominated him before me?
That was Wade, and I'll second that nomination.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you, Ted. Are we ready? I believe it feels like we're ready to vote. And we have Eric Housley. Do we do a roll call, or Marie, do I need to do a roll call on this?
Yeah, let's do a roll call, please.
Okay.
Marie.
Okay, Marie, can you do a roll call?
I can. Eric?
In the words of Bar Franco, I guess that's a yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Courtney?
Yes.
Danielle?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Hector?
Yes.
Joshua?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
Ted?
Yes.
And Wade?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So we are ready to go. We have a chairperson in place and a vice chair. And from here forward, committee members, I will lead you through this as I'm trying to remember how to do all this, but Kelly gave a really nice overview of what goes on next. And so the next item on the agenda is public comment. And this is for items that are not on the agenda. And this is where we would reach out to the community to see if there's anybody who would like to address the committee regarding any matter of public interest not appearing on the agenda. No action may be taken on the comments of an off-agenda item unless specifically authorized by law. If the speaker wishes to address the committee on an item on the agenda, time will be provided before that item. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. So I suppose I ask Nikki. Nikki, do we have anybody in the community who would like to comment?
I don't see anybody with their hand raised at this time, except for one of your panelists.
Okay. Dr. Musetti, do we need to wait, or I suppose we can go on?
Nope, you can go on, Barb.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can move on. We don't have any public comment raised, so you're good.
Okay.
You can proceed.
All right, good for us. So with that, we need to approve the agenda from here forward. And is there a motion to approve the agenda? We're actually on consent item 5. Is there a motion?
So moved. This is Josh.
Okay,
I'll
Josh.
second.
Okay, and all in favor to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting? Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, and Marie, that's okay to do that, right?
Yes, you can do that way, Barb.
And Marie, you've captured the first and the second. The second was by Wade, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Okay, all right, I'll be better about that then, since we're in the Zoom, to make sure we know who those people are, Marie. I'll
Thank
help
you.
you with that. Moving on to item number 6 is a discussion item, and it looks at this point, I probably think that Mike and Rob are going to talk to us about some of the issues with the Carneros property, which is the piece of property that we'll be looking at during this committee time.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Franco. So Nikki, if you could bring up the presentation to display on the screen, that would be great. So this particular presentation will be shared by 3 people, be myself, Rob Anguilla, and then Kelly Rem as well. So once again, thank you all for being at our first meeting here for the 7-Eleven Board Advisory Committee. And again, this is for consideration of property disposal of the Carneros property, which is located at 1680 Los Carneros Avenue in Napa. So if you go to the next slide, please, Nikki. So I'm going to present to you a little bit some details around the Carneros Elementary School site. The initial year of construction was in 1950, and I'll show you some buildings in just a moment so you can know what was done in 1950 and then what was done in 1962 of the permanent locations, permanent buildings there. There was modernization done in 1980, roughly 1988, 1999, what we can find from records. And this was an extensive modernization that was done throughout the entire district in many of our school sites, anywhere from interior upgrades to our computer lines and things like that we ran. In 2006, roughly 2006, a new multi-purpose building was established on the particular school site. And then in 2007, a lunch structure, shade structure, was erected on the site. The enrollment, we could gather, was roughly roughly 200 students were on this particular campus, and the school was having this issue with declining enrollment, and so officially the Board of Education voted to close Carneros Elementary School in June of 2011. The students from the school site then transitioned to 3 different school sites: Browns Valley Elementary School, Snow Elementary School, and Napa Valley Language Academy at that time. If you could go to the next slide, please. Soon after the closure of that particular, of the Carneros Elementary School, Stonebridge Charter School was offered this school site, again at 1680 Los Carneros Avenue. It opened in August of 2011. In August of 2014, as many of you know who live in Napa, we had a South Napa earthquake. This property was impacted. The Carneros property was impacted by an active fault zone. In addition, we didn't discover this. Well, I shouldn't say we didn't discover the pipe, the PG&E electric gas line that was there. PG&E came out and with the amount of tents they put up, made it known that there was something going on here. And then the presence of a 26-inch wide Pacific Gas and electric gas line that runs parallel to the north side of the school property line was discovered. And based on the school district analysis, and we went through extensive reports that we went through, a rebuild at the Los Carneros Avenue school site would not be economically feasible. And then as a result of this, Stonebridge School was relocated to the former Mount George Elementary School campus at 1019 2nd Avenue. And that has just recently occurred in the months of June and July with the relocation of Stonebridge off this particular campus due to the active site of earthquake fine. And just so everybody on the committee knows, when you have an earthquake fault zone falling within a school site, the Division of State Architects does not permit you to do any kind of modernization on a school campus because you're using public dollars to do this work. And their feeling is, which understandably their feeling is because it's near or sits on an earthquake zone, doing any kind of work on that particular campus, they do not want you to invest public dollars onto that particular campus. And so that's why we decided to move them because of that particular reason, and we did not feel it was economically feasible for us to build on that particular site in a different area. You can go to the next slide, please. Some more details of the Carneros Elementary School site. So as I explained earlier, and I'll show you again a picture in just the next slide, but initial year of construction of the school site, Building B was done in 1950 and Building A was done in 1962. The land, the square footage of the land is a little over 4,222 square feet, which comprises 9.7 acres. On the school site, there's administrative and program offices. There are 5 permanent classroom spaces, 4 permanent student restrooms, and 2 staff permanent restrooms. And then in addition, because of the size of Stonebridge at the time, there was 5 portable classrooms put onto the campus.
I have a question.
Yes, Liam.
I have a question. Do you happen to have maps that you can show?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in just a second. I'll show you that in just a second,
All right,
Liam. And then there's one portable library, 1 permanent multi-purpose room with a catering kitchen. The construction of the multi-purpose room, as we said, was back in 2006. It was part of our Measure M, and that total square footage was a little over 5,000 square feet. The property is bounded on the north by agricultural land, on the east by single-family rural residence, and on the south by Los Carneros Avenue, and on the west by an equestrian and ranch properties. It's actually in a very nice location, and it's a very rural location. And if you haven't ever drove down Los Carneros Avenue, it's a rather very pristine rural area, but the property actually sits amongst other residences, and it's a very nice piece of property. There is a well and a pump house, and the well is active, and it is in place. There are 2 septic systems, one of which was replaced in 2000, and then there are 2 water storage tanks on the property for fire suppression or fire prevention. I believe one is about 7,000 gallons and another one is about 4,000 gallons. So then if we go to the next slide, you'll see this map, and then this will help bring some details together. So as I stated earlier, Building B, which was built in the 1950s, that's referred to as B4, B5, B6, B7, and then the R's for the restroom on this particular map. Those numbers B4, B5, B6, they don't necessarily correspond to the classroom numbers, but from our maps, this is what this is, just so you know. And then the A buildings was built in 1962. Those are permanent structures. Then the buildings that are in blue, are portable structures that currently are still on the campus. And you will note that we have already removed 4 of the portables. 2 of the portables closest to B7 were leased by Stonebridge Elementary School, Stonebridge School, excuse me, and they then had those buildings removed, and then we had 2 other portables removed for their use for the school district's use on that. There's also a storage building that you see located on this property. It's a non-DSA storage building, meaning students cannot go into that storage building, but adults can. And then there's a kind of like a barn structure that has been removed by Stonebridge, and that was part of their programmatic needs. And then you have the multi-use room or the multi-purpose room, as I stated, and that's the large building at the top of the screen. The 2 water storage tanks are in the dark blue by room 11, or what's identified as room 11. And then the pump house is actually in the parking lot. So the well and the pump house is in the parking lot, and that's the brown building located on that. And then the two leach fields, as you can see, are noted. One of the leach fields is by room 6, and then the main leach field is beyond that to the south of the other smaller leach field on that. There's also vineyards on this particular property, a little bit over 3 acres of vineyards in this property that were established, we think, approximately 20 years ago. And they were, the district was actively had a vineyard management company that was overseeing the vines and then selling the grapes. That then transitioned at some point to Stonebridge to oversee, and since they've left, obviously they're not overseeing the vines now. And it also at some point, all that area that you see that's in what looks like for gardening spaces by the barn that was removed, that all used to also be vineyards, but at some point those vineyards were taken out and then allowed to establish the farm that Stonebridge did. And then what looks like circles, which may resemble trees, those are actually, that's where the sprinkler systems are. That's always been a play area, a grass play area for the students on that. So I'll stop there and see, Leon, I hope that answered a lot of your questions, but if not, I'll certainly be able to entertain any other questions you might have, or anybody, or the other committee members.
How much land belongs to this school?
9.7 acres belongs to the school, and that's the entire piece of property that includes the leach fields and the parking lots and all that. And
does some of the vineyard and near the storage areas, is that included?
Yes, everything. Yeah, everything you see on this particular map. I know we didn't outline the exact property, but it's that kind of that square that you see there. So it's all the vineyards. There is no more school garden there, but the garden that's there, the vineyards to the south, the leach fields, and then all the buildings and the playgrounds and the parking lot to the school site.
And do you sell the grapes, or is it just?
They had been sold in the past. That's correct. They had been sold in the past. They currently, Stonebridge was selling the grapes. Again, at some point, the management of the vineyard turned over to Stonebridge, and then Stonebridge was doing that. I don't have any records unknowing because they were selling them. I don't have any records of what they were selling them for at the time. But currently, the grapes are not being sold to any venue, any winery, or anything like that.
And just kind of as a reminder, remember Stonebridge that was previously occupying it was a charter school. And so it was part of them leasing the property that they were operating the vineyards. And so the district wasn't benefiting from the sale of the grapes. It was the charter school as its own educational entity that was benefiting from those revenues. We were benefiting in terms of revenue from the lease that they were paying of the property until they vacated.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Musetti. Wade, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, just quick question. No city water, no city sewer services hooked up to the site at all?
No, none at all out there. They do have that recycled water, reclaimed water, but we have not. That has not been hooked up at this particular site. And then Arvin, you have your hand up, but I don't know if that's from an old hand or.
No, because I was thinking that how big the storage place is.
The storage place is approximately 700 square feet.
Oh, it's a small one.
Yeah, it's not very large. It's about maybe a little bit larger. It's roughly the size of a portable, but I believe it's a little bit smaller than a portable, and a portable runs 960 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
Barb, you have a question?
I do. So these materials Marie, are these the materials that you sent out to us today? Because I picked up the binder, but if people wanted a hard copy to be able to really look at this and in depth, is that what you posted in the email? I didn't open the email because I already had some of these.
This presentation was not part of that binder. The binder did have a couple maps and a little bit of other information on there.
And just as a logistic, I was actually thinking about that, Chair Franco, is that when we post the 7-Eleven agenda, which will vis-a-vis our platform, which is the Agenda Online platform, and you receive that link, there will be attachments that will be part of the agenda. and you would download those attachments so that you can review them in advance of the meeting. If that's something that we can also do, Marie, and that we should probably note this, we can also, once that agenda is public and has gone out, we can also, just as a backup for the committee members, send any attachments that are attached to the public agenda. We can also send it to the committee vis-a-vis email. And then that way you can review the slides and whatever material is attached to the agenda. Because for some people, it could be technically challenging to figure out where to download the attachment. So we can do that, send it via email as well. So the agenda will publish, it'll have attachments, you can find the material there, but we'll also, just as a backup, email you directly the attachments as well.
Good, that'll be good for the committee to have that information prior to the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question. Mr. Schultz, you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say that I was able to download the attachment from the agenda, but does the district have any interest or intent to remove any more of the portable buildings?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we do have some intent with the storage facility. We are looking at potentially relocating that off the site because we could use that at other school sites that do not have storage facilities like this particular one. And then as far as the portable usage, we don't anticipate us having any use for portables for our own need, but we are in discussions with other entities out there who are looking for portables. And if it does not cost the school district any money to remove the portables, we may look at that as an opportunity for us because these portables are quite old. And so the usefulness of their lifespan for us has been exceeded, but they may serve the need of another entity. But again, we would only do that in the event that it does not cost the school district any money to remove the portables off that campus. Arvin, and then Eric, and then Greg.
No, I have the same question, removing all the parts from the school, that if there's any item can be sold for the school or not, or somebody can pick it up. But if they won't sell it, then there's no use of this item, you know.
Yeah, good question again, Arvin. And yeah, the usefulness of the portables is pretty much exceeded their lifespan. I do not believe we could sell the portables to another entity, but there are groups out there that would potentially like to have the portables. They would pay for the relocation expenses and not cost the district any money for that. We do not want to incur any kind of expenses to remove the portables off this property at any time. We will not do that. Eric?
Thank you.
So yeah, I assume that this is zoned agricultural based on the determination on where it's at. Is there any and this might be out of like turn, but if we were able to find a way to lot line adjust an extra 0.3 acres, you now have a property big enough to put a winery on in the Napa Valley at 10 acres. So I think it could change the land value pretty significantly, but is there issues with someone else putting structure on it down the road, and or is there zoning that's outside of the kind of agricultural limits?
Yeah, so what we'll do when we're done with the questions about the property itself and some of these things, Rob Mangual is going to talk about the disposition of the property and the entitlements on the property, and we'll get to that question, Eric. Okay, Greg, and then Barb, and then Wade. Greg Bennett, any questions?
I had to unmute myself. This is in the context of whether we would want to keep this property or not keep this property. What was the highest enrollment ever at this campus?
I would have to research that, Greg. What I do know though is that there was a maximum of 5, 6. I believe there was a maximum of 7 classrooms, permanent classrooms out there. And so you could roughly speak on, about maybe let's say 30 kids per classroom, so 210. But I could get you more specific details for the committee members as well too. Stonebridge had approximately 280 students out at the site, but they did have more portables on that particular campus than I believe Cornell's ever had at that time. But I will get back to you on that.
And I just, in response to that question, I just want to remind what Mike illuminated and reiterate, which is really important, is that because of the gas line and the earthquake fault issue, this is not an optimal property to be a school in the future. So I just kind of want to reiterate that, because it would cost the district a lot of money to continue to use this as a potential school, even down the road. So I just kind of want to recognize that because of this intersection between gas line and earthquake fault.
Okay, Barb, and then Wade.
My question has to do with the removal of the portables. And does the property become more attractive with the removal of the portables, being that they would have to be removed anyway? I mean, is it become more valuable with, like I said, the portables not there? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Rob, I don't know if you want to try to answer that question.
Sure. Well, first off, it depends on the condition. So there is a lot of value in this property in terms of the buildings that are on the property already. So it has lots of value in terms of already having some substantial structures that are there. And so in terms of looking at the portables, again, someone may, when we go to market this property, assuming that's where we go, there is value in what's existing there. Now, if you have a portable that has 0 lifespan left on it, you could make an argument that has no value, especially if whoever buys that piece of property doesn't see the use in having a portable there. So Mike and I are having that discussion about what portables need to stay there and so forth. But in terms of the buildings in general, this property is unique because it is in the ag reserve and it has existing buildings on it. So that does make the property very unique outside of just having grapes on the property.
Thank you.
Wade?
Any way to overlay where the gas line and the fault are on this screen?
Yeah, good question. I will update this and we'll try to get something out to you. The gas line, if I'm not mistaken, runs at the top of the screen, north of the multi-use building, down that road that you see. And then the fault line runs, if you look at portables 3 and 4 and 6, it runs in that general vicinity right there.
Gotcha.
And I believe, Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did share a document that had the Miller Pacific study in it.
Yeah, that was with the, I guess, electronic binders, what I'm calling it. But I can download those and send those out as attachments, because right now I think they're uploaded through Google, and there might be some difficulties for some.
So instead of providing you with a hard copy binder, we provided you with an electronic copy of electronic binder. And in that is the Miller Pacific study that was done, where a significant amount of trenching was done on this campus to determine where the fault line was exactly, how deep it was. And so but we can certainly overlay for this and send that back out to rest of you in the near future.
Mike, I have a question.
Let me hang on, Leon. Let me see if Arvin had his hand up before. Arvin, did you have another question? I think the answer is no, but.
I don't have any question.
Okay, great. All right. Yes,
No.
Leon. Thank you. Leon?
Yeah, I'm naturally interested in value because I'm an appraiser and a realtor. And I'm wondering, have you had anyone capable, qualified to do appraisals or estimate the value of this site as it is, or as it could be?
Good question. We have not done any appraisal on this particular property. And later, once Mr. Manguala talks about the disposition of property in the current property entitlement, we're going to discuss our appraisal strategy with the committee.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Great. Thank you. Next slide, please, Nikki. So now I'd like to turn over to Rob Manguela, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, and he'll be talking to you about the disposition of property. Rob.
Thank you very much, Mike. So for the next series of slides, I'll be speaking about the disposition of Carnero's property and some of our strategy around that. Next slide, please. So whenever a school district examines a potential sale of real estate, the current and potential future entitlements must be considered. Real estate entitlements are a set of approvals needed for the right to develop a piece of land. So in many instances, you have a piece of property that has the ability to have the entitlement changed for a residential development. That's more valuable, generally speaking, than a piece of raw land. So in terms of what we have in front of us for this piece of property, the current designation for the general plan designation is agricultural resource, along with the zoning for agricultural watershed. Some of the other details for it, so ag policy LU 21 is the agricultural open space to be preserved. The maximum building intensity is 1 dwelling per parcel. And so as you can see from this picture, we have far more than 1 dwelling per parcel due to its former use as, not dwelling, I should say. So let me correct my language there, Leon, because I saw your head turn there. We have additional buildings on the parcel itself, which again, we think that it does bring value to the land. In terms of policy LU 29, governmental uses and public entity use of 1983 shall be allowed to continue to operate and continue to use the existing buildings or facilities, but shall be allowed to expand only for the purposes of modernization of the facilities and meeting additional demonstrated public needs to the extent permitted by law. So again, we do think that there's value in that. And then until December 31st, 2058, the provisions governing minimum parcel size for lands designated agriculture, watershed, and open space and agriculture resource set forth in the policies shall not be amended to reduce the minimum parcel size unless such amendment is approved by a vote of the people. Next slide, please. So these are some additional details about the entitlement. So you can see on this approximation of where the property is located, that it's well within the agricultural watershed and open space in Napa. Next slide, please. And so why does entitlement matter? So in order for a school district to determine the highest and best use of any potential excess property, the district must consider possible entitlement changes. So for example, raw land that's highly restricted in its potential future use is worth less money than land with a desirable current use, or may have entitlement changes allowed, such as a building or residential or commercial use is going to have more. So this makes it challenging when we talk about our property disposition. It looks like it's a typo there. Next slide, please. So the current entitlement is highly restricted, as I outlined in the previous slide. So based on the highly restricted general plan designation of agricultural resource and zoning as an agricultural watershed, obtaining entitlement changes to build housing is highly unlikely to impossible for this piece of property. As a result, the district is not recommending pursuing any entitlement changes for this property. Next slide. So Leon, this kind of gets to some of your questions, and it is really going to vary, and Kelly Rem will talk about this. So here are some recent sales, and some of them are actually fairly old, going back to 2016. And so what I attempted to do in this slide is come up with a cost per acre. So you can see going back into 2016, there's a 12.49 acre piece of property that sold for $3.8 million, or about $300,000 an acre. A 4.31 acre piece of property sold in 2018 for $2.3 million, or $533,000 per acre. A 1.24 acre property sold in 2018 for $1.2 million, or about $1 million an acre. And then a half an acre piece of property sold in 2020 for $749,000, or about $1.3 million per acre. So again, there's not a lot of sales there. A lot of the property there, it varies quite a bit based on its potential use and what we see in the area. But again, we do think that there's potential value here for the school district and for our taxpayers when we take this money and put it back into our facilities. Next slide, please.
I have a question.
Oh, you have a question there, Leon? Go ahead.
Yeah, regarding what you're saying, the value may be, I think you need to get a lot of help from professionals out there who do this, who buy and sell property, who appraise property. because you may have to go all the way to St. Helena for a comparable. That's just what might have to happen. So you have to be very careful about estimating a value without doing a really detailed search of sales and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. So again, our attorney, Kelly Rem, will talk about that. Those were just recent sales. Again, some going all the way back to 2018. I am no way a professional. That is not my area. And you obviously have lots of experience in that area. And we certainly will, Kelly Rem will certainly talk about that and the process that we're required to do in terms of putting this property out there for public bid. But we definitely have important.
Kelly, just to elaborate, Kelly Rem, our attorney, will talk about our appraisal strategy. So we will be sharing that with the committee.
Good question there, Leon. Thank you.
You have a lot of hands up, Rob. Should we?
Yeah, let's pause right there. That's great. So you want to, Barb, you're the first on my screen there.
I think Wade's hand was up and our.
Oh, okay, Wade.
No, I'm okay right now. I want to hear the presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Arvin, do you have any questions? We can't hear you.
Well, let me have a photo. Leon is correct about the appraisal value, because being a real estate agent and a broker, we should go check the more cities or more counties, how much the properties are sold in this area. So then you can evaluate the property on this location. So that is my suggestion to you.
Thank you. We will absolutely be talking about that. Thank you so much. And that is our intent. But let's continue with the presentation. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Rob, I think Barbara has a question, and then Courtney, I don't know if I saw your hand up.
Yeah, Rob, I want to just clarify, make sure that I understood this. What you said is that the property is zoned agricultural watershed and that the district does not have any interest in changing that status.
The district does not have any interest in changing the status. Yeah.
When it goes to whatever, then whoever purchases that property purchases it as an agricultural watershed zone.
Well, that's not completely correct. Can you go to the previous slide? So let me make sure. One more, I think it's after that, and another one. I think that's going in the wrong direction. So let's go back up to towards the beginning, please. Marie. So
yeah,
it's current. There it is. So it's located in the general plan designation of agricultural resource. So it's in the ag area, right? So it does not, I mean, when somebody buys the property, it would keep the current designation right there. So it doesn't change when somebody purchases it. So essentially it's designated as a school for public use right now, right? So when they purchase it, that entitlement doesn't go away. So what we've had another piece of property that we sold in the past that was a previous school, where the person who purchased it continued to use it in that manner. So again, we are not pursuing any entitlement changes for this. Leon?
Are you sure it's agricultural watershed zoning and not agricultural preserve zoning?
Let me double check on that for you. So the question is it agricultural? Can you state that one more time, Leon?
Ag preserve or ag watershed? Ag
okay,
preserve,
let me double check for that.
Yeah, ag preserve is more valuable, and as I understand it.
Yeah, and Leon, I think you may be right. I think it may be ag preserve, but we'll double check on that.
Okay.
That's a very good question. Wade, do you have a question?
Yeah, okay. So you're saying, so it's an existing use now that's not in use. So it's kind of a grandfathered, non-conforming existing use. And you're saying if you sell it to somebody else, it's your belief that they can continue with that existing use, even if it's not a government entity?
That is my understanding, but ultimately, again, I'll have to refer to Kelly to double check on that. But yes, that is my understanding of that. So if somebody were to buy this land, I don't think that, for example, the city would be in a position to say, well, you sold it, it's no longer a school, you have to rip down the structures. So the structure, I think, again, the big part is the structures would be able to stay, which again, if you look, go ahead.
Wait, I think they would be, because and I'm not 100% sure about this, but if you go back to the Soda Canyon Elementary School up off of Soda Canyon and Silverado Trail, those particular buildings are still existing on that particular campus. And that's the property that Rob's referring to, that we have some past precedent. Now, granted, that property was sold many years ago, well,
Yeah.
many years ago, but the buildings still do exist. If you were to drive up Soda Canyon, you would see the buildings on the right-hand side as you go up. It's right there. And from Silverado Trail, you can see them as well too.
Kelly, do you have anything to add to that?
So certainly to provide specific guidance on these issues, I'd have to review the municipal code and look at what these designations say. But I do know that, I mean, sometimes you have a specific use on a property, and when it transfers to someone else, they've got to get a new conditional use permit or something like that. So it may be something along those lines. I'm just not sure without looking at the municipal code. But that's something I can work on with you, Rob, and bring back to the committee at the next meeting if desired.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Any additional questions?
Marvin, is that an old hand or a new question?
I think that's an old question. His hand has been up for a little bit since the beginning of the slideshow. So next slide, can we continue with the presentation, please? So we want to go down. Okay, next slide. So the current entitlement, again, it's highly desirable in this location. Again, some of the amenities that we have there. The Carneros property is located in a very desirable location. There are vineyards there. There's well water there. There's a leach field. The existing structures create value. Again, it's a niche property and 9.7 acres. Again, when we go to market this property, we're hoping that, you know, somebody who's interested in keeping the structures there and keeping the property intact will see the value that we see in the land. And then it would, assuming this is what happened, it would be a fairly fast process compared to, you know, having to go after entitlement changes like we would for potentially other pieces of property.
I have a question.
Sure, Leon.
What is the water situation that is provided to the site, on the site? Because there's no local water company or water system that has to come off of wells or whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, we can give you again, Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we did put some information about the well in the digital binder that we attached, that we have available, but we can try to send that out to you. We did have to monitor that well as we had people on that site. So we have pretty good reports within the last, 3, 4, 5 months, whenever we did our last person coming out. I don't have an adequate, I can't tell you how many gallons per minute actually come out of that well. But what I can tell you is that it was serving, over 280 kids, and it was irrigating over an acre of garden area, as well as the vineyards in there. Leon?
And the leach field, where is it located in relation to the well location? Because those things.
Yeah, no, you want to have certainly some distance from those two things. So the well, again, is located on, it's right, there's a pump house right on Los Carneros Avenue. So there's a parking, where the parking lot is. And then with the leach fields, as you can see from this picture, the two leach fields are in the bottom left-hand corner. And then where the leach fields are. And then above where the brown building is, I don't know if you can take your cursor, Nikki, and circle it, but it's in the parking lot. That's where the pump house and the well is located.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. Good question.
I think Greg has a question. Greg?
Yes, did they participate in the recycled water line that went out to Carneros?
No, Mr. Greg, to the best of my knowledge, we do not, I'm gonna have to double check. I do not believe we have recycled water out there, that we have the connection fees. I know it does exist, but I do not believe that for whatever reason, the school district did not participate in the recycled water, but I will double check on that.
Any additional questions? Are we ready for the next slide? Sounds like we're ready to move. Next slide. We've done the slide. Again, let's continue. So the sales process, I think this is where we pass it off to Kelly Ram. So Kelly, could you talk about how we ensure the district receives the maximum value, please?
Sure. So there's just like, well, with the 7-Eleven committee process, I kind of mentioned the education code requirements that apply. That's sort of the very first step in the process of selling or leasing property or disposing of property generally by a school district. And it's followed by a whole bunch of other procedural requirements that districts are supposed to go through. In my experience doing this work, particularly over the past decade, school districts are pretty routinely seeking waivers from the State Board of Education that allow a little bit more flexibility in the process. And that's one of the ways that school districts have really been able to maximize the value received, because the process is just not quite as strict. It allows you, having the waiver allows you to negotiate, seek competitive proposals, get into the qualifications of the buyer and not just the ultimate, what's the purchase price. So that is often something that is done. And, we're at the beginning stages of this process for this property. So what the school board may decide to do in terms of seeking a waiver, selling or leasing the property or not remains to be seen. But that is one common tool. The waiver process is a common tool that helps school districts to increase the value that they might be able to receive for that property. And sometimes we do see, really, really small pieces of property that are unique and don't have a lot of value that a district might just want to kind of unload to get rid of the carrying costs. And I don't think that's the case with this particular piece of property. So a waiver may be something that the board might consider adopting in the future.
Any questions about this topic? Because sometimes the term waiver, it causes confusion. So again, we are not bypassing the process by using a waiver, for example, like we did with the farm property. It allows us to pick not only the highest bid on the property, but also the most qualified buyer, right? So oftentimes you can get a buyer who would bid on a piece of property, but they might not have the financial means to do that, or they might give you a bid with a really high bid on it, but then essentially they're just locking up the property because they're not giving you releases of deposits and so forth in a timely manner where they would lose money if they were to fall out. So what our interest in is pursuing the highest amount of money that we could get for this property, but also being able to analyze each individual packet, not just on price, but on qualifications and likeliness that they'll be able to actually close on the deal. So any comments or questions about this piece right there? It's fairly important. Josh, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious, one, kind of what you're thinking about with timeline with this, because I know, right, to get on the state board's agenda, there's a couple months lead time at least. And then are they generally routinely approving these kinds of waivers?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can speak to this. Well, I can sort of speak to both. I'm not sure about the district's board specific timeline for approving a waiver. So that would obviously be up to district staff and getting through this process and what the board decides to do. But you're absolutely right. The state board meets I think it's every 2 months. And so to get on their agenda, you typically have to have the waiver submitted at least, I think, about a month in advance to get on that next agenda. And then they usually have some questions and things. To answer your second question, I have, knock on wood, so far not seen a single waiver that was not approved by the state. So yes, they are absolutely routinely approving these. I do understand that there was a time, 10, 20 years ago when they were not. But at least for the past decade, I have dealt with many, many school districts that have gotten waivers approved in the past few years. And just again, if there is discomfort around the idea or the concept of waiving statutory requirements, do realize that when the state board approves these waivers, they approve them with conditions, and those conditions still require a competitive process and certain timing requirements. So there's a lot of nuances both in the education code and the waiver process as well. So both the legislature and the state are trying to help make sure that there's flexibility in the process, but also transparency and competition. And so in a way, I think those two things kind of dovetail nicely so that the district can work with a broker and market the property and get the highest value, but there still are checks on that process, even with the waiver in place.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
All right, so next slide. I think.
Next slide.
So Kelly, before you, I know that you're going to talk about appraisal strategy. And so could you also make a connection a little bit for the group, a little bit to, again, obviously when you get in an appraisal, the final value is determined based on the competitive process. So if you want to just outline also the appraisal strategy along with a connection to the competitive process that you intend to follow.
Sure. So I appreciate the comments and questions about appraisal earlier on, because I do think that it's an important tool in this process. Absolutely. And I would say pretty much every transaction I've been a part of with the school district, there is an appraisal. And that is something, you know, and again, that's an important tool when it comes time to decide whether or not to sell the property or lease the property and which offer to go with. And we're certainly not anywhere near that point yet. So it's in terms of kind of status right now, the district is looking to get the property appraised. That's in process, but it has not been completed yet. Once the appraisal is received, typically that's not shared with the public. And unfortunately that means shared with the committee because this is a public meeting. And the reason for that is exactly what Rob said. While it is a good tool for the district to have just to kind of gauge what a professional sees as market value, it can also be limiting in terms of what you might get. You know, you kind of want to leave the market open-ended to have proposers, developers, whoever's out there that might be interested in this property to make their best offer that they can for this property. So the appraisal is a good tool for the district to have to help evaluate those proposals when they come in, but there is some downside and some strategy call to be made about whether to share that in advance. Because again, if it were made public, and that's part of the Brown Act, if it's shared with this committee, it becomes a public document, then it's also shared with anyone who would potentially be making an offer on the property in the future. So there's some risk to the district that their bargaining position could be harmed by doing so, or impacted, even if not harmed. So anyway, so the bottom line there is the strategy that the district and I have come up with is to have the property appraised, but that will remain confidential. It is also likely, with how backed up I'm sure Leon can appreciate appraisers are, that we won't even have that appraisal report by the time the committee is ready to make a recommendation regarding this property. So that's kind of where we are on that.
And just to elaborate on that, Kelly, just to confirm and make it very clear to the committee, that means that your firm would outsource the appraisal, correct, for it to remain sort of attorney-client privilege?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, questions, Leon?
Yeah, regarding an appraisal, as I understand it, over the last few years, many years, in fact, the district has used the same appraiser for every school property that you bought and sold. I'd like to see you use several appraisers, give out several appraisals, and qualified people, and not necessarily because they have an office in Napa. I'd like to see someone from this, you know, anywhere else who is qualified to do appraisals of this kind of property. I mean, you're talking about millions of dollars, most likely. And what's 2 or 3 appraisals going to bother you if you don't? I'm not involved in the appraisal business anymore because I'm retired, but I have seen already that you need to expand your list of appraisers, and they can come from anywhere in California and do this job.
And Leon, you have our commitment. So you are correct. We have not had kind of a broad bench of appraisers that we use. And so by using the firm, we will not be relying necessarily on our typical appraisers, but rather, you know, we'll look kind of in the appraisal vendor market at large to find someone qualified. And that'll come to us vis-a-vis the firm, Kelly Rum's legal firm. And right, Kelly, we can commit to that, Kelly, correct?
Absolutely. And actually, committee member, I think that's a very good point, you know, and we are committed to, you know, thinking outside the box on this and getting somebody in there. And I don't know where the district is on getting more than one appraisal, but I think those are all good points.
Yeah, I think, and to build on that, Leon, I think, we've discussed this before, that we do want to get the highest value we can for this particular piece of property. We're committed to that as well too.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, I saw hands come up. I said Ted and then Eric.
Yeah, before I raised my hand, it was really to what Leon's point addressed, but I appreciated Kelly's description of the why behind the appraisal strategy. And I think it was really clear that the goal is to gain the most value for the property, and that therefore the strategy to me makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that explanation.
Yeah, thank you, Ted, for that. And I wanted to reiterate that too. I know that may be a little bit different than what people maybe were thinking about, but in speaking with Kelly and learning about this, I think this would be the best to help maximize the value for the school district. I think this was a good way to go about. So thanks, Ted, for that comment. Eric.
I guess it'd be more of less of people from necessarily outside of Napa and more of due diligence of somebody that's qualified as well. The last appraisal I had done on a property of mine, somebody out of Novato, and was just clueless with, comps of the valley, because like you showed there, Mike, you have a quarter of an acre, or Rob, I guess, on his presentation, all the way up to 13 acres. And on the property they were trying to appraise, they were giving me a quarter acre of something from 1954 compared to 2.5 acres from 1996, right? So I think some people that don't really understand the valley as well. So maybe the due diligence would be because am I correct? If we get multiple appraisals, you kind of take the middle, or you can just take whichever appraisal you want to get, right? So if we end up somebody from Sacramento that may be clueless of the actual value of land in the Napa Valley. So if we're looking at the best value there, we might want to do our due diligence before even asking for that to happen. Because if we have to take, hey, here's the appraisals from 4 million to 14 million, they're going to go, okay, let's meet in the middle,
Right.
I don't know that answer. So just.
I think that's something we'd be working with Kelly's firm on to determine, the types, who's going to appraise, who's going to be the appraisers, and what their experience is in appraising a property and the value. Because as many of you know, property values can change from Carneros all the way up to Santa Elena, Calistoga, and everywhere in between.
And I think oh, sorry, go ahead, Ron.
No, I was just going to add to, so just as a reminder, so like if you look at it from an appraisal standpoint, we're not purchasing a piece of property. So it's not from the stance like, hey, is the district overpaying for a piece of property? What we're trying to do is get an idea for what the property is worth. Ultimately, like, what is a piece of property worth? It's based what someone's willing to pay for it. And so if we follow a competitive process and over an extended period of time, and the bids that we get on the property, that's going to guarantee us the true value of it. Like, ultimately, when you put a piece of property up for sale, what is it worth? I mean, you can get an appraisal and it could say it's worth X. And we're hoping that no matter what number we get for an appraisal, that we get more than that. That's always the goal on the sales end. And so that is our goal with this, which is why we're keeping the number confidential, because we don't want to set a ceiling for what we could potentially get for this piece of property.
Yeah, so it's a data point for us internally, and our hope is Eric gave the range of 4 to 14 million, and it becomes like, so what if the competitive process renders $20 million as a top offer? We then go in with the confidence around, wow, we got an offer vis-a-vis the competitive bid process that was, beyond the range of even, the top appraisal that we attained. So I want, it does, I think what Rob said matters, like buyer listing a property versus us being a seller, and how we use that data point it's kind of important to note that. So, but we'll do our due diligence so that we have that data point to make sure that we're not selling ourselves short.
Greg Bennett.
Yeah, so I guess it's already been said, but I want to make sure that we look at the peculiar and unique land use issue matters that relate to the value of the property, because the comps for agricultural use property might not exactly have the same benefits that this property has, at least based on some of the things you mentioned earlier. So we want to make sure that we get, the appropriate land use advice.
Thank you. Appreciate that information. Arvin, your hand's still up. Do you have another comment or a question?
No, I have no questions.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments on anything that was presented before we go to next steps?
I believe next steps is the next agenda item. Is that correct, Mr. Pearson?
Yes.
Chair Franco, I need you to ask if there's any public comment on the discussion item.
Yeah, I have that right in my notes to do that.
Okay.
Nikki, do we have anybody waiting to make public comment on the discussion on the Carneros property? Nikki?
I do not see any public comment at this time.
Okay, all right, thank you, and so recorded. With that, we will, are there any additional questions that the board, that the committee has for staff that is present today?
I have one.
Okay.
Is this Carneros property the only property we're considering with this committee?
I'm so glad that you asked that, Leon. I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. We probably should have maybe agendized that. We dove right into Carneros. Our goal with the 7-Eleven committee, so like I said in my opening, the purpose of this is to do surplus of property, right? And so this happens to be the property that is ready for the surplus discussion, right? So that's why we're bringing the Carneros property to you first. As you know, we've gone through the painful process of school closures, and we have other properties that are available. Harvest will be, is a property, a school that we closed. It's operating this year. It will be vacated for 22-23. We have Yountville, Up Valley. And so as those properties become ready for the disposition discussion that we're having tonight, for example, around Carneros, we will bring those properties that are sort of in the queue as they become ready for discussion, the way Carneros is kind of ready, right? Because of the entitlement issues, et cetera. So, we've got our meetings scheduled. We will schedule future meetings over the course of this year based on those properties, when they're ready for that disposition discussion. So this is the one we're looking at now, but the other ones as ready, we will bring them and call meetings for the other properties that are in the queue. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
So just as a point of clarification, Dr. Musetti, as those other properties become available, then you'll reconvene the members of this committee to go through the same process we're going through with Carneros.
Correct.
Okay.
Rob, Mike, that's correct.
Yeah, if I could just add a little bit there, Dr. Musetti. So we would bring them to 7-Eleven after we determined some preliminary plans around best use. And so the Harvest property is something that we're hoping to use as a model. So the Harvest property, we did hire a firm to help with engagement. And so what we'll be doing is we'll be engaging with some ideation with our school board members about some potential uses for that piece of property, the Harvest property. And then with the idea of going out to the community, engaging with the community in the city of Napa to talk about our shared interests around the Harvest property. Ideally, in my perfect scenario, we would be able to pursue some entitlement changes for that property that would allow some housing. So for that piece of property, we would want to pursue entitlement changes. And so the goal would be to get all of that work done, agreements kind of worked out with the city before we bring that to 7-Eleven. Once we gather the data, we come to some agreements with the city. The idea would be then to bring that agreement and bring some great data to the 7-Eleven committee so we can have some really robust conversations about potential use for that property. So those properties are different than these, but again, we are looking at our other properties where there's potential use for residential housing, which means we will need to pursue some entitlement changes.
Rob, that would also apply to Yountville Elementary School too, correct?
Absolutely, that would absolutely apply to Yountville.
Yep.
Yeah. So my question for the committee I'm just hope I'm speaking on behalf, just for clarification, as the district becomes ready for the other properties to get to the 7-Eleven committee, then you would call this group back together and that you would not be selecting a new 7-Eleven committee.
Correct.
That's
Yes.
correct.
That's our goal. That's correct,
Yeah,
Rob.
I just wanna make sure
We've erected this committee and this current composition of the committee to deal with the properties that we are currently working on in terms of entitlement and that are in the queue for sale. So that's our goal, is to use this current composition for all of those properties, correct?
Okay. I just hope that for the committee's sake, that people understand how that piece is going to work. So I think that's good for us to know.
That's a great clarifying question. So thank you for making that very explicit. Mike, Marie, from a logistical standpoint, I just can't remember. Did we give the committee members future dates, or do we just have the couple of dates around the Carneros property scheduled?
We've only done the ones around the Carneros property as dates because we had not, we are not in a position at this point on those other properties to let people know. We did, as we talked to committee members, let them know that this process, and I hope most of the committee members, if not all the committee members, remember that we talked about that we would be dealing with future properties down the line, and it was our goal that they would be able to join us with those future property discussions. But we would certainly work with committee members too on dates and things like that too, to make it so it works for as many of these committee members as possible.
Great.
Right.
So,
Commitment that we'd always stick to this time frame on Tuesdays.
Right.
That would be our focus.
Right.
Date.
So we'll call the future meetings beyond Carneros, we'll call those on an as-need basis when we're ready, giving you ample time. But you can predict and anticipate that it'll be kind of these two, we're looking for Tuesdays around this similar time.
perfect. All right, perfect. Any other questions from the committee?
Looks like you have Eric with the hand up, Barb.
Eric, oh no, hang on. Eric Housley.
So I guess question of clarification. So the next meeting, are you going to propose, like, for example, are you going to come back and say, okay, we've had a consultant tell us that the value of the property at lease would be XYZ? I mean, in my mind, I already know that there's no reason why you would lease this property over sell it based on my reasoning, but that doesn't mean I know everything by any means. So are we going to have those kind of details so it'll help us make those decisions? Is that next meeting? Or how does that look?
So it does not appear, Eric, based on what I've talked with Kelly Rim and regarding appraisers, that we would have an appraisal ready by the next meeting. It's maybe several weeks out that we would actually have anything with appraisal on that. We would look at the next meeting for a goal, one of the goals of being a recommendation to the Board of Education on the disposition of the property, whether it's a sale or a lease from the committee, provided you have enough information to make that decision. So we would bring back, we've been asked to share some other information that we would be able to provide via email and then to review it at the next meeting. But the goal would be to see if the committee is ready to make a recommendation to the Board of Education on the 24th regarding the property, whether it's a lease or a sale.
And Mike, I apologize. I guess my question, I understood Kelly saying it's going to take some time and that's going to be private anyway, which is totally understandable. I think it's more of the concept of a lot of people don't understand a land lease and an agricultural lease, that you would even look at it. Like, so for example, a property that I have, we have an acre vineyard that we get about 5,000 per acre just for the land lease on this type of a property. Is it a $50,000 net income that's going to be coming to the district per year? And would that be even remotely worth it? If so, we can make that decision knowing that we have no idea what the appraisal value is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm thinking of, if we know a little bit of the details of what somebody who's a professional that can tell us what that would actually lease for approximately. Obviously, you'd have to find the right person that would be interested in using the site. But at least that'll help us kind of either eliminate that a lot easier. Otherwise, we have no idea. Some of the people might not have any idea of how that lease would work compared to whether it's 4 million or 14 million. It's a sale, you get the net rev, right? And so I think that's where I'm looking at it, is if we can understand at least the concept of what that might lease for. And it's, again, you're kind of juggling because you really have to know the person willing, like Rob said, whatever they're willing to pay for it. But there is a general concept that a professional in the, I would assume, vineyard management industry would have an idea. So
Rob, you handle the lease and sales. Do you want to answer that
So
question
yeah,
first?
so I want to make sure I understand what you're asking, Eric. So it's a really good question. So it sounds like what you're asking for is, first off, you're recognizing that the district will not be sharing the value of an appraisal because it works counter to the district, and so you wouldn't be making a recommendation based on the appraisal. But what I'm hearing is you want to make sure that we do our due diligence around the lease component to make sure that we're actively considering any value of a lease versus a sale. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and the reason why I say is when Justin Sienna approached me because of my shopping center close to their property, they were wanting to try to sell the property or lease it, and they found, they wanted to do Lowe's and Sprouts and all these different things, and they found the retirement home that came in. So they've got a constant revenue source of what they've chosen to bring in there for the next 90 years or whatever whatever they agreed to. And so that was a different revenue stream that they chose because it was there. If this would just be an ag property, most likely that value is much lower in a lease, but I'm guessing that. So for me to make a decision to say sell or lease, I kind of need to know more about what the option would be to lease so does that make sense, Rob?
It does, absolutely. So let me see what I can do on that. Let me look into that for you. That makes sense. It does.
Oh, okay. Any other questions? Nice work there, Eric.
I think
any members? What do we have?
Josh has a question.
Josh?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest for a future agenda. I mean, Dr. Musetti touched on this in a general way at the top of the meeting, but I think it might be useful to briefly describe for the committee, any specific restrictions on the use of the proceeds from a sale or a lease, or if it goes into the general fund, which I think there are some provisions that allow that, what other restrictions that might place on the district?
As a future item, is that a request for a future item, Josh?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any other hands. We have the future meeting dates, the next two meetings, with the next one being on August 24th, followed by what potentially will be the last meeting on September 7th. And with that, I am looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Eric?
I motion it.
Second?
Wait a second.
Okay.
Barb, before you take a vote, could I just, for clarification, double check for the next meeting that the concept around lease proposals that Eric had brought up is something the committee would like to see at the next meeting. And then what Josh brought up about the specific use and the restrictions of the sale or the lease of a property. I just want to double check on agenda items before we, and if there's anything else before we conclude the meeting.
Mike, the third one I noted was confirming entitlement and land use.
Ag preserve versus ag preserve versus ag watershed.
Watershed. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then Eric, if I could just ask a question. So are you actually looking for, this is the value of what it would lease for, or just more of a discussion about lease versus sale? Because determining the value that you could actually lease that piece of property for, in this timeline might be challenging. Or is it more like, generally speaking, a lease you'll get this % of a value versus a sale? Could you clarify that a little bit?
I guess, Rob, I'm not looking for a specific, the discussion wise, I already know what I would answer based on the fact if this is just going to lease as a vineyard property, somebody's going to rip most of it down and park a tractor there. But if there's something else so if you were to contact Jim Barber Landscape or Vineyard Management or one or two vineyard management companies and said, what would something like this be worth? They know winery owners that would possibly either want to go into a long-term lease for that type of an option. So it would at least give us an idea how to value that. And I think the number is going to be so low that it would be easy for us when you say, would you like to lease or sell? Otherwise, everybody's going to go, sell, I guess, like, because we don't really know. So I'm not worried about a specific actual number, but I know when you talk to Doug Hill Vineyard Management or any of those guys, you can, especially ones that are familiar with the Carneros region, and I can get you a couple of names of people that are
That would be
down there.
great, yeah.
If you want to reach out to me, Rob, I can give you a couple of names of people that might say this would probably lease for X, because they could set up a temporary whatever and they would use it for X, Y, or Z. At least we have a ballpark. And if that ballpark similar to the 4 and 14 million for sale, it might be 4,000 an acre to 20,000 an acre. We don't know, but we can still look at that net at the end of the year as a ballpark, and it still may be nowhere close to the sale, which is what I'm assuming. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a professional appraisal as much as someone that with knowledge of the area that's a kind of a ballpark for us.
That was very helpful. I'll reach out to you.
Thank you, Eric, for that clarification.
Dr. Musetti, do you want any other items that you would like to review for the next meeting before we take a vote on adjourning?
Chair Franco, the only other thing I just want to point out to the committee members is that Marie will be sending out the form, the form 700 that will need the committee members to fill out, but we'll lead them through that process.
Okay.
And we'll have those 3 items as a ongoing, that'll be the next phase of discussion for this property.
Okay.
Any materials related to that we can send in advance, we will send, once we publish the agenda, we'll send them also via email, like I mentioned. And then if after that discussion, we feel prepared to take a potential vote, the committee will decide that. One kind of just logistical, some of you have already served on 7-Eleven committees. The idea is we've got it, Kelly, you can help me. I've just got a couple rounds of this of experience under my belt, but we do need to get a report of the recommendation, the advisory recommendation for the board prepared. So that would also be another meeting. If we do indeed take action, we would also kind of need another work session to kind of work through the advisory report that would go over to the board for consideration. Correct, Kelly?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what we did last time.
Yep.
Right.
And just for the committee members know, that's for Chair Franco and Vice Chair Housley to oversee a lot of, and then they bring it to all of you, so you don't have to put a lot of time and energy into it.
Woo! All right, let's see where we've landed here. Thank you for the clarifications on different items that need to be discussed at our next meeting. And we do have a motion to adjourn made by Eric and seconded by Wade. And all in favor of adjourning today's meeting?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Marie, are we good on that? Or we don't have to take a roll call, do we?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. Thank you. We're adjourning at 5. My watch says 5:59 or 5:56 is the computer. So that's good. Thank you all very much. Be looking at your email for information coming about a week prior to the meeting, and have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.